What's good, everybody? Finder Bub here. Thanks for checking out the video. Today, we're talking about Reykjavik, the Blue Lagoon, and the Golden Circle. Welcome back to the Iceland travel series. If you missed last week's video about budgeting, planning, and packing and things of that sort, you can click a tap right over here for that. Otherwise, without further ado, let us begin! We spent the first day of our trip in Reykjavik, touring around the town. We tried to take in as much of what Iceland's capital city had to offer in the time that we had. So we walked up this little walking street that has all these shops with all this stuff where you could buy like shot glasses with Vikings on them and mugs and little cool pocket knives and, you know, lots of gimmicky gifts for your friends and family back home. So to be honest, I didn't really feel like there was all that much to see in Reykjavik. We went up this walking street to this fancy church that had a really cool organ inside that was huge, and we took some pictures and we were just like, hey look, we're tourists. Click, click, clicky, clicky, clicky. Oh, you're fabulous, baby, fabulous. So the plan was to go see this funky looking church with this big ass organ inside before heading to the grocery store where we would stock up on all of our camping food and road trip snacks and whatnot. Road trip adventure. Huzzah! I am the mighty Thor. They love Thor in Iceland. Topic number 2. The Blue Lagoon. After dropping off the groceries at the Airbnb, we changed into bathing suits and drove to the Blue Lagoon, which is about halfway between the airport and downtown Reykjavik. Not too long of a drive. Pro tip, if you plan to visit the Blue Lagoon, book your shit online in advance. It is worse than Disneyland in there, and that's no lie. Because it's so close to the airport, anyone traveling to Europe with more than a 2-hour layover in Iceland ends up going to the Blue Lagoon. It was packed. Ugh. After we got our Scantron bracelets, we put our stuff in the locker room and went to the hot spring, which is just this massive pool area. There are all these booths where they give you mineral mud to rub all over your face. There are a couple bars in the pool where you can use your bracelet to buy drinks and just pay for them when you leave after you hand the bracelet in. Yeah, in retrospect, I should have brought the GoPro inside, but it was my old Hero 3 that I've had since college, and I was worried that the waterproof case wouldn't hold up in the hot water. Yeah, it was dumb. This video would have been better. But, yeah, didn't bring it in. So you'll just have to take my word for it and go watch a bunch of other videos about it. Potato Jet, he did a good video about it. I like Potato Jet. He's a good guy. He's a good potato. Yeah, so we ended up eating at this nasty fast food place for just way too much money. It was like $20 for like a fish sandwich. If you're in a place that has decent food and you think it's too expensive, just eat it anyway, because everywhere is that expensive. You're just going to be hungry later, and it's going to be harder to find things because everyone's just going to be like, I can't do anything because I'm so hungry. I can't think straight. And we're all arguing with each other about where we're going. And just eat if you're hungry. Just do it. Trust me. In retrospect, that was a pretty weird day compared to the rest of the trip. The Blue Lagoon was a pretty poor representation of what Iceland's thermal hot springs had to offer, especially because it was just sort of like plucked from the natural environment. But yeah, at the time, it sort of left me wondering what sort of trip we had gotten ourselves into, because, you know, we went there for the nature and the landscapes and everything like that. And the first day, we just did all these weird touristy things that really weren't appealing to me at all. And it definitely like put a bit of a weird taste in my mouth. And I was worried that the trip was not going to be as good as I had hoped because of the impression that the Blue Lagoon left me with. If that makes any sense, bruh. But then again, maybe we should have hit up the spot after a week of camping and road tripping as opposed to before. So yeah, there's that to consider. If you're interested in more of a natural hot spring experience, be sure to tune into future episodes where I'll cover what, in my opinion, was a much more enjoyable thermal hot spring experience, especially compared to the commercialized spa that is the Blue Lagoon. We went back to the Airbnb so we could get some sleep before starting our car camping road trip. The next morning we packed up our car and hit the road towards the Golden Circle. Before we headed out of town, we had to stop by this camping store because we needed to pick up some fuel cans for our camping stoves. They were way too expensive. Don't ask me how much they cost because it was insane. Obviously, you can't bring explosive gas in pressurized canisters on an airplane, so yeah, we had to spend the money. Unfortunately. If you do need any sort of camping gear or anything like that, this outfitter store called Ellingsen, I'll leave a link below to the Google Maps location. It seemed to have a lot of stuff. I really cannot stress enough how expensive it is to buy these types of things in Iceland. So there's this guy named Peter McKinnon. He makes all these videos about photography and cinematography. I've actually learned a lot from his channel. Very, very educational and entertaining content, if I do say so myself. But yeah, he does this whole video based around how he spent way too much money on a camp stove when he was in Iceland. It's actually pretty funny that that happened because it happened to us too. Yeah, so go check out his video. Put a link right there. Here, there's a link. Click the link. And yeah, just a little funny universal truth that Iceland has expensive stuff. And that's pain, but such is the trials and tribulations of life, am I right? I don't know what I'm talking about. As I was saying... Oh... Wait a second. Finally. Yes. You know what this means? Finally get to talk about the interesting parts of the trip. Yeah, this is gonna be a B-roll section. Our first stop along the Golden Circle was Thingvellir National Park. See, Iceland sits right on top of the Mid-Atlantic Rift, which is the crack between the North American and European tectonic plates. This means that half the country is on the Eurasian plate and the other half is on the North American plate. It also means that they get a lot of earthquakes that cause cracks and rifts in the ground. Iceland is actually the only place where the rift is not underwater. You can actually walk between the two plates in this canyon in Thingvellir National Park. It also happens to be the same place where they filmed those scenes in Game of Thrones where Arya and the Hound are walking around before they bump into Brienne and Pod. Podrick Payne. Pod? What are you doing, Pod?
I'm learning how to do the sword thing, Lady Brienne.
It was a cool place to walk around and take pictures. There's this quaint looking church across the duck pond that used to be some sort of parliament building, or whatever the equivalent is for Vikings, according to this article that I'll link down below.
Sources. Cite your sources, kids.
Yeah, you can learn about the history and stuff somewhere else, not here. This was more of a landscape appreciation trip as opposed to one of those historical tour adventures. So you can read about that somewhere else. They're called the sagas. We were on a fast-paced trip and ain't nobody got time for that. Pew! Quoted. Then we jumped back in the car and continued along the Golden Circle route.
Chapter 4, Strokkur Geyser. Stroke.
Our next stop was the Icelandic version of Old Faithful. Yeah, so on the way over to the geyser, you cross this steamy hot stream and a bunch of other bubbling pits of doom. They're like... It's gonna be crowded there, so make sure you bring something to get those damn tourists out of the way. And then we waited. You don't have to wait that long. It goes off every like 5 or 10 minutes. Once the geyser erupted, we and the billion other tourists who were there headed back to our cars to continue racing around the Golden Circle. And by the way, Wikipedia told me that the name Golden Circle doesn't actually have any cultural or historical significance. It's really just a fun name that the tourism board came up with for marketing reasons. It's like the cheap flights. It's how they get you. Those pesky tourism board people.
Kudos to them, though. It totally worked. I was looking for this golden circle the whole time.
Yeah, it totally worked. There were a shit ton of people there, even though it was the off season. Supposedly, it was the off season. That's why we went there, because it was the off season. But apparently there are still billions and billions and billions of tourists. The next stop on our Mario Kart adventure was Gullfoss. Gullfoss.
Yippee! Aha! Mario! So in case you are unaware, Gullfoss is a huge waterfall.
So much water, bro. BT dubs, foss means waterfall in Icelandic. So anytime you see foss in the name of a place, it means it has a waterfall. For example, there's a river called the Strokkur River. When the Strokkur River runs into a cliff, you get dun 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 Skagafoss. An easy way to remember it is that foss kind of sounds like faucet, and you get a little mnemonic device there to help you out. Alright. Do us a solid and comment below if you know anything about Latin roots or etymologies or anything like that. Could just be a quinky dink, but you never know. From there, we drove to this other waterfall called Faxi. Next to the foss, the lake had this abstract-looking drainage runoff thing where I should have known enough to snap a long exposure pic, but at the time, I was more of a slave to the automatic mode on my camera, and I knew not of such things. Oh well. Next time. After Faxi, we drove to the Kerid Crater, where we caught the sunset, and I got a couple dope Instagram pics. Follow me at Binderbug.
And that is the golden circle, folks.
The plan for the rest of the trip was to follow Route 1, also known as the Ring Road, all the way around the coastline till we got back to Reykjavik. Yeah, so the Ring Road is pretty well paved in most places, but I'll tell you what, this ain't no Eisenhower interstate, if you know what I mean. Our little hatchback did pretty well, but it might have been a different story if there was snow on the ground. In spite of that, on the road of the ring, there are still a great many perils. A great many perils. For example, there are a lot of rivers that the ring road goes across, and the bridges are really just an accident waiting to happen. Almost all the bridges are only wide enough for one car to cross at a time, so more often than not, you have to stop for someone coming off the bridge in the other direction. After the Kerid Crater, we had a bit of a drive to our campsite, so we stopped for gas by Sellfoss, which is this little town on a massive river that had one of these very bridges. As we were filling up the tank, two cars must have converged on the bridge at high speeds, and naturally one ended up in the river. So as we were pumping gas, we noticed police car lights on the other side of the river. We walked down the shoreline of the river to see what was going on, because there were a bunch of people watching. I shit you not. There were EMTs sprinting down the opposite bank of the river with rope, and you could see this guy being swept down the river, and they were just like running down the river, like trying to catch him. And this was no hot spring river, okay? It was probably freezing cold. Since we needed to cross the bridge, we got stuck in traffic behind this police barricade for like an hour, and you know, we never saw them pull anyone out. We saw several helicopters flying over back and forth, and then after a while we saw one of those inflatable rafts with a bunch of scuba guys on there who were like diving, doing some sort of recovery mission, and yeah. It was an eye-opening experience for sure. After seeing that, nobody really had to tell us to drive safely. After an hour of waiting in traffic, we decided to take the long way round. That was one of the many instances where downloading offline maps on Google Maps in advance came in handy. Travel tip: download offline maps before you go, because then you won't have to use your international data to find your way around. We finally made it to our campsite at, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce this. Or, yes I am. Yes I am. If you're from Iceland, please do not take offense at my attempts to pronounce your language. I'm doing my best, and if you have some sort of like phonetic spelling that you want to put in the comments, please feel free to do so. Help out future tourists so they don't seem like a bunch of gringos. I don't know what you call them in Iceland, but yeah. In Mexico, I'm a gringo. We finally made it to our campsite at Hamragardar. Hamragardar. First grade, Miss Shamban taught me how to sound it out. Been flying high ever since. We finally made it to our campsite at Hamragardar, much later than we initially planned. Little did we know that this would become kind of a consistent theme throughout our trip. This whole notion of showing up late to our campsite, we didn't really anticipate it at the time, but yeah. That night, setting up our tents and making camp and whatnot was really all we had the energy for before we just fell asleep. So, the big question here is, what can you take away from this video? First of all, if you're only spending a short amount of time in Iceland, I would say that you should spend as little time as possible in Reykjavik. You can like get an Airbnb there, but I would rent a car, drive out of there as often as possible. There's a lot to do in the surrounding area. The Golden Circle is a great day trip. From our experience, Iceland's natural landscapes have a lot more to offer than the cities do. Suggest that you spend more time outside the city, going on hikes, seeing various natural features and things like that. Number two. Second of all, first of all, second of all. Second, if you only have one full day in Iceland, I would suggest that you spend it driving around the Golden Circle. It's close enough to the airport that you can definitely make it back. The traffic that we experienced was very unusual because of that unique situation we ran into with that car accident with the guy who fell in the river. But yeah, you can definitely make it back to the airport in much less time than it took us to get to the campsite. Number three. Third, if you have time to spare, check out the Blue Lagoon on the way back to the airport. They have showers there so you can freshen up for your flight. Just don't forget to bring a towel. There are a few other day trips you can take around Reykjavik, like the Snæfellsnes Peninsula and the Glimmer hike. And there are more natural hot spring experiences in the vicinity of the city if you prefer that to a spa. But I will cover all of that in future episodes, so be sure to tune in to learn all about that. And last but certainly not least, drive safely, for crying out loud. It's not worth getting into an accident, especially when you're crossing bridges. Alrighty, that concludes this episode of the Iceland series. If you like this video on Reykjavik, the Blue Lagoon, and the Golden Circle, and you think you might enjoy more content of the sort, and you're not already one of my 24 ever so loving and loyal subscribers, do yourself a favor, hit subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I upload next week's video about the Black Sand Beach, more waterfalls, and various other exciting things that we saw on our journey through the south of Iceland. If you've been to Iceland before and you have any tips about driving around the Golden Circle or the Ring Road that you think that other people watching this video might find useful, please leave a comment below. But before you do, I just want to thank you so much for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video and you felt like you got something useful out of it, be sure to share it on social media and with any friends that might be thinking about taking a trip to Iceland. For more information on the locations we visited and the gear we brought on our trip, be sure to check out the full article at finderbub.com/Iceland. Alrighty, my people, once again, thank you so much for watching this video. If you're planning your next trip, don't let the small details stress you out. Remember, life's an adventure, so relax, breathe in the outdoors, and don't forget to appreciate the finer things in life. See you out there, people.